In this training, we're going to talk about how you can stop focusing so much on the opinions of other people. So the opinions of your coaches, your teammates, maybe your parents, and really learn how to get that trust and get that worth from yourself instead. So let's get started. When thinking about why it's important to really try to not worry so much about other people, we first need to understand how this hurts us. So I want you to imagine right now you really are thinking about what everybody else is thinking of you, right? You're concerned with their opinions. Now, when this happens, so let's say you're really worried about what your coaches think of you during practice or during games, that's kind of where your mind is focused. The reason this hurts you, right? The reason this is bad for your performance is because when this turns into some serious worry, it actually impacts the way that you play, because instead of being present and focused on the play that you're doing right now, what your mind is actually focused on is, what is my coach going to think of me? So in reality, they are keeping you from performing freely and your best because you are just so concerned with what are they going to think of me. So when you're worrying too much about other people, it can be your coaches, it can be your teammates, it can be your parents or anybody else. It's taking you out of the moment and it's causing you unneeded stress and anxiety and pressure you're putting on yourself because you feel like you have to perform some special way in order to get their approval. So when all of this happens, right, when you start to worry too much about what other people are thinking of you, there are certain behaviors and thoughts that it's going to cause. And these are not going to be good ones. So these are not something that you want to display. But this is just a natural byproduct of worrying too much about what other people are thinking. So one of them is going to be you're paralyzed by fear. When you are worried about what your coaches think of you, for example, or what your parents think of you, you're going to be paralyzed by fear when you're beginning a game. Why? Well, your mind is thinking, I need them to approve of me. I'm worried about what they're thinking because I want them to think highly of me. I want them to think that I'm a good player. So then going into a game, you're going to be fearful of making a mistake, and that can often lead to some fear of failure moving forward. Another one is the comments from other people are really going to alter your mood. When you have this feeling like, I need other people to validate me as a player, what's going to happen if your coaches or your teammates make a comment about the way that you played? That's going to directly impact your mood. It's going to lower your confidence, might lead to some anxiety, but overall, it's just going to make you feel badly about yourself. Rather than being able to objectively look at what they're saying, maybe even ask yourself, do they have a point? Is that something that I can use to improve my game? You don't have that option because it just directly negatively impacts your mood and just completely tears you down. So that's what can happen when you're worried too much about what other people are thinking of you. It's going to directly impact your mood whenever they make a comment. Now, another one is that you are always seeking approval. This is because the core reason you are worried about what other people think of you is because you need their approval. If you had that approval from yourself, that true understanding that you are as good of a player as you want to be, right? You are good enough. Then you wouldn't be needing that approval from other people. Or better yet, if you knew that, hey, I don't care what everybody thinks of me. I am working towards being the best player that I can be. Every single day I'm giving 110% effort because I am doing all that I can. Equally, you wouldn't be worried about what other people are thinking. But when you are worried about what other people are thinking, this is because you need their approval. Whether it's due to a lack of self-confidence or a lack of self-worth, you need somebody else to tell you that you are a good player or that you're a good person or a good performer or whatever it is that you do, but you need that validation from others. So that's kind of going to be your focus, right? Going into practice, going into games, your mindset isn't, how can I become the best player I can be today? Your mindset is, how can I perform so that other people think that I'm good? And then next is that you're going to live in constant anxiety. When you're worried about other people, what is the word that I just used? Worry. Well, what is anxiety? Anxiety is worry. The more you worry about what other people are thinking of you, whether it's your coaches, your teammates, or whomever, the more anxiety you're going to play with. The more anxiety you play with, the more fear you play with, and just ultimately, the lower your performances are going to be. And then lastly, you can never let yourself go. Now with this one, what I want you to think about is never letting yourself perform freely. Never allowing yourself to just go out there and compete like you would if you're playing pickup basketball with your friends or throwing the football in the yard or just going to swim for fun. You can't have that level of freedom because your performances are so bogged down and caught up in what is everybody else thinking of me. So why do we care in the first place, right? Why is it that it's such a natural state of mind for athletes to be in where we are worried about what other people are thinking of us? Well, I really think that it's It's a byproduct of having some low self-confidence, low self-worth, and then needing other people to determine our value, right? We don't see ourselves as good enough. So we say, okay, if I can get this validation from others, whether it's my coaches, my teammates, my parents, my friends, people in the stands, if I can get that validation from them, then I can feel okay. Then I can see myself as a good player. But what you just learned in terms of everything that comes along with focusing on what everybody else is thinking, it's actually keeping you from being the best that you can be. But that really is where I think that this comes from. It comes from having a little bit of lack of self-worth within yourself. And so you're saying, hey, I need this approval from others. I need somebody else to validate me as a player. And because of that, your eye is constantly looking for that validation, right? So whenever you are constantly worried about how other people view your performance, it's really because you feel the need to have them view you as a good player. It's simple as that. You want them to see you as a good player. And so your mind is thinking, if I worry about that, maybe I can will them to think I'm a good player. But that's not what you need to do. That's not going to help you play your best. So it's time to completely let that go and let's turn your focus back onto yourself. So how are we going to do this, right? What is the solution? Well, the solution is increasing your own self-worth, giving yourself that validation rather than looking for it from other people. Now, when we're working to increase your self-worth, what we're going to do is use a couple different exercises. One is going to be altering your self-talk. Then we're going to make a list of good qualities about yourself, then set goals, and then lastly, something called the mirror drill. So let's kind of go into these one by one a little bit more in detail. Altering your self-talk. Now, your self-talk, it's the way that you speak to yourself. It's the way you speak to yourself before a game, during a game, before practice, during practice. And when you're worried about other people, your self-talk is likely going to be placed on them, but also you're probably going to speak down to yourself, saying things like, you're never going to be good enough. Look at coach's face. He definitely doesn't think that you're a good player. That sort of stuff. You're speaking to yourself in a way that reassures you that other people are not giving you the validation that you want. So we really need to change that. When we're wanting to increase self-worth, by altering your self-talk, it's going to really powerfully impact that in a positive way. So what we're going to do first is recognize your negative self-talk, right? So you first have to recognize your negative self-talk before you can do anything about it. A good way to do this is writing in a journal, maybe for a week, just kind of outline all the negative thoughts that you have. Then what we're going to do is swap negative for positive self-talk or productive self-talk, however you want to look at it. In this step, all that you're going to do is, with that list of negative self-talk statements that you created in terms of when you recognize them, create some positive alternatives. And then just start repeating those to yourself on a daily basis. Next is make a list of good qualities about yourself. This list of good qualities, it's pretty cool because it's going to boost your self-worth, but also it could be a pretty cool exercise for you to do just in and of itself that's going to give you some insight into what your strengths are. What are your strengths within your game? You want to make sure that you're building upon your strengths. You always want to look at your weaknesses to make sure you can kind of pull those up and build upon them, but you already have strengths within your game right now, both mental and physical. You need to pay attention to those strengths and really work on improving those strengths and making them even better, and that's going to give you that much more of an edge over your competition. So once you have your list compiled, right? Once you have your list of strengths or positive qualities about yourself listed out, it's a good thing and a good habit to begin reading them to yourself every single day. And that process of reading them is really going to reaffirm that positive self-image that we're really working to build when trying to craft more positive self-worth. Next is setting goals. When you're wanting to increase your self-confidence or your self-worth, by giving yourself small goals that you can achieve, that's going to work wonders. Because what's going to happen is after you achieve one small goal, that's going to boost your self-confidence, boost that trust you have in yourself, make you say, hey, I am capable of achieving success. So then you're going to set another one, and then another one. And then maybe over time, you can start making the goals a little bit harder, a little bit more difficult. But by starting small, you're really making use of the practice of compounding, and you're allowing yourself to gradually develop into higher self-confidence and higher self-worth by seeing yourself succeed at these small goals over and over again. So set some small goals for yourself, and that's going to be a very good way to begin building some self-worth. And then lastly is the mirror drill. Now the mirror drill is an interesting one because you can do it a couple different ways. The base principle is at the end of the day, so let's say after you take a shower, you're going to spend a minute or so looking yourself in the mirror. At first, it's going to be very, very uncomfortable. I remember when I first used the mirror drill, I was a little embarrassed. Well, I was a lot embarrassed actually. And I wasn't comfortable at all looking myself in the eye in the mirror and talking to myself. the more that I did it, I can honestly feel in real time my self-worth building, my self-image building, my confidence in myself building. So what you can do with this mirror drill is look yourself in the eye in the mirror. And then here's a couple options. You can kind of say what you're proud of for the day. So like the good things that you did. You can just take it more kind of an objective approach and say, these are the things that I did well in terms of practice and games. And you can also make it more of like an evaluation exercise where you say, this is what I did well today. Let's say you had practice, for example. This is what I did well in practice today. But then this is what I can improve upon. And so then you say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this, this, and this to really help myself improve. But by looking yourself in the eye in the mirror, by telling yourself what you did well, telling yourself what you're proud of, that's going to really work on strengthening that self-image and that positive self-worth that we're after. So when it comes to self-worth, the reason it's so important is because self-worth acts as an armor against the opinions of others. When you're trying to not worry about what other people are thinking, I'm sure in your sport you've heard your coaches or your parents or somebody say, just don't worry about it. Don't pay attention to what they're saying. Well, we have to get to the core of that. And the core of that is the reason why you need to listen to what they're saying. And that need comes from wanting their approval, wanting that validation. But it's time for you to give that to yourself. And that's why developing self-worth, it acts as an armor because no longer do you need to look to other people for their approval because you give it to yourself. So put these exercises into practice, go through them, and really watch as your self-worth begins to grow. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I put out 2 new videos each week on sports psychology and mental training to help you build a championship mindset. Now, speaking of a championship mindset, I put together a free training, and I've linked to it in the description below, that walks you through the exact exercise that I use with the athletes I work with in one-on-one mental game coaching that's going to take you through how you can develop and uncover your own championship mindset, and then some tools that you can use to strengthen it moving forward. So go ahead and click that link and get started with that training. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.